In this video, we delve into the darker side of early church history, exploring 10 of the most notorious and brutal heresies that rocked the foundations of Christianity. While the New Testament promotes love, unity, and patient correction, the early church's history tells a different story, marked by intense conflicts, violent persecutions, and harsh measures to combat heresy. From the Albigensian Crusade's ruthless massacres to the fierce doctrinal battles of the Donatist and Iconoclast controversies, we uncover how the early church's struggle to define and enforce orthodoxy often stood in stark contrast to the teachings of the Bible. Join us as we reveal the shocking stories behind these heresies and their lasting impact on the course of Christian history. The Albigensian Crusade, launched by Pope Innocent III in 1209, was a brutal military campaign aimed at eradicating the Cathar heresy in southern France. The Cathars, also known as Albigensians, were a Christian dualist sect that believed in a fundamental opposition between the spiritual and material worlds. They viewed the material world as the creation of an evil god and rejected many Catholic doctrines, including the sacraments and the hierarchical structure of the Church. This theological divergence, combined with the Cathars' growing influence, alarmed the Catholic Church, leading to the declaration of a crusade against them. The most infamous event of the Albigensian Crusade was the massacre at Béziers. As the Crusader army, led by Simon de Montfort, approached the city, the residents were given an ultimatum to hand over the heretics. When they refused, the army attacked, resulting in the slaughter of an estimated 20,000 men, women and children. According to reports, the papal legate, Arno Amalric, famously declared, "Kill them all, God will know his own," highlighting the indiscriminate nature of the violence. This event set a brutal tone for the rest of the crusade, which continued for 2 decades and saw numerous battles, sieges and massacres. The Albigensian Crusade had profound and lasting consequences. It decimated the Cathar population and brought the region of Languedoc under tighter control of the French crown and the Catholic Church. The brutality of the Crusade, characterized by mass killings and the systematic destruction of Cathar strongholds, demonstrated the lengths to which the Church would go to enforce orthodoxy and suppress dissent. It also paved the way for the establishment of the Inquisition, which would continue to hunt down and eradicate heretical movements across Europe for centuries. The Donatist controversy, which emerged in the early 4th century, centered around the question of the validity of sacraments performed by priests and bishops who had lapsed during the Diocletianic persecution. Donatists argued that these sacraments were invalid, as the clergy administering them were considered traitors to the faith. This rigorist stance caused a major schism within the Christian community in North Africa, particularly in the region of Carthage. The controversy escalated when Circumcellion, the newly appointed bishop of Carthage, was accused of having been consecrated by a traditor, a bishop who had handed over scriptures to Roman authorities. The mainstream church, led by figures such as Augustine of Hippo, opposed the Donatists, arguing that the efficacy of the sacraments did not depend on the moral purity of the clergy, but on the inherent holiness of the church and the sacraments themselves. Augustine's arguments highlighted the need for unity and forgiveness within the Church, stressing that the Church was a mixed body of saints and sinners. Despite these theological arguments, the conflict led to significant social and political turmoil, with Donatists establishing their own parallel church hierarchy and refusing to recognize the authority of the Catholic bishops. The Donatist controversy had far-reaching implications. It prompted the involvement of the Roman state, with Emperor Constantine initially attempting to mediate the dispute. When these efforts failed, subsequent emperors resorted to coercion and violence to suppress the Donatists. This included the confiscation of Donatist property, banishment of their clergy, and even execution of their leaders. The schism persisted for centuries, highlighting the deep divisions within early Christianity and the challenges of maintaining doctrinal and ecclesiastical unity in the face of differing interpretations of faith and practice. Priscillian of Avila, a prominent bishop in Spain during the 4th century, became one of the first Christians executed for heresy by fellow Christians. Priscillian's teachings incorporated elements of asceticism and Gnosticism, advocating for a strict moral code and a rejection of certain Old Testament texts. His emphasis on personal piety and spiritual purity attracted a significant following, but also aroused suspicion and hostility from the ecclesiastical authorities. Priscillian's critics accused him of sorcery and Manichaeism, a dualist religion that was deemed heretical by the mainstream church. In 385 AD, Priscillian and his followers were arrested and brought to trial before a synod in Bordeaux. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, they were condemned for heresy. The matter escalated to the secular authorities, and under the influence of powerful bishops such as Athasius of Ossonoba, Priscillian was executed by the Roman magistrate Magnus Maximus. His execution sparked controversy and outrage among many Christians, including St. Martin of Tours, who opposed the use of capital punishment for doctrinal disputes and viewed the execution as a grave injustice. The execution of Priscillian set a dangerous precedent for the use of state power to enforce religious orthodoxy and suppress dissent. It marked a significant departure from the early Christian emphasis on martyrdom and non-violence, introducing a period where theological disagreements could result in lethal consequences. This event foreshadowed the later developments of the Inquisition and the use of state-sanctioned violence to combat heresy, reflecting the growing entanglement of church and state in the regulation of religious belief and practice. The Hite Wars, which took place in Bohemia, modern-day Czech Republic, from 1419 to 1434, were a series of revolutionary conflicts sparked by the execution of Jan Hus. Hus, a Czech priest and reformer, had criticized the corruption and moral decay of the Catholic Church and called for a return to the teachings of the Bible. His advocacy for church reform and criticism of indulgences and clerical immorality resonated with many in Bohemia, but also drew the ire of the church hierarchy. In 1415, Hus was summoned to the Council of Constance, where he was tried for heresy and subsequently burned at the stake. Hus's martyrdom ignited widespread outrage in Bohemia, leading to a popular uprising against the Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire. The Hussites, Hus's followers, formed a formidable military force that included various factions, such as the radical Taborites and the more moderate Utraquists. They sought religious and social reforms, including the right to receive communion in both kinds, bread and wine, and a reduction of clerical privileges. The Hussite armies, led by skilled commanders like Jan Žižka, employed innovative tactics and achieved significant victories against the crusading forces sent by the Catholic Church. The Hussite Wars were marked by intense violence and brutality on both sides. The Catholic Church launched multiple crusades against the Hussites, resulting in bloody battles and sieges. The Hussites in turn engaged in acts of retribution and destruction, targeting monasteries and churches aligned with their opponents. The conflict finally ended with the Compacts of Basel in 1434, which allowed for some religious concessions to the moderate Hussites while reaffirming the authority of the Catholic Church. The Hussite Wars not only underscored the deep divisions within Christendom, but also foreshadowed the later Protestant Reformation and the violent religious conflicts that would sweep across Europe in the following centuries. The Iconoclast Controversy, spanning from 726 to 843 AD, was a profound theological and political conflict within the Byzantine Empire over the use and veneration of religious images, or icons. Iconoclasts who opposed the veneration of icons argued that the practice was tantamount to idolatry and violated the commandments against graven images. This movement gained significant support from Emperor Leo III, who issued an edict in 726 AD ordering the removal and destruction of icons. The policy of iconoclasm, or icon breaking, was enforced with considerable zeal, leading to widespread destruction of religious art and persecution of those who venerated icons. The controversy was not merely a theological dispute, but also had deep political and cultural implications. Iconoclasm was seen by some as a response to the perceived decline of the Byzantine Empire, an attempt to purify and strengthen the church and state. It also reflected broader social and cultural tensions, including resistance to the influence of monasticism, which was strongly associated with the veneration of icons. The conflict led to violent clashes, with iconophiles, supporters of icons, facing imprisonment, exile, and even execution. The destruction of icons and the suppression of their veneration caused significant cultural and religious upheaval. The Iconoclast Controversy culminated in two major phases. The first phase ended in 787 AD with the Second Council of Nicaea, which restored the veneration of icons and condemned iconoclasm as heretical. However, the controversy reignited in the early 9th century under Emperor Leo V, leading to a second wave of iconoclasm. This phase ended in 843 AD with the restoration of icon veneration by Empress Theodora, an event celebrated in the Eastern Orthodox Church as the Feast of Orthodoxy. The Iconoclast Controversy left a lasting legacy on Byzantine art, theology, and politics, highlighting the complex interplay between religious belief and imperial authority. The Paulicians were a Christian dualist sect that emerged in Armenia during the 7th century. They rejected the orthodox practices and hierarchical structure of the Byzantine Church, advocating for a return to the simplicity of the early Christian communities. The Paulicians believed in a dualistic cosmology, viewing the material world as the creation of an evil god, distinct from the benevolent God of the spiritual realm. This belief system led them to reject many traditional Christian doctrines and practices, including the veneration of icons, the cross, and the sacraments. The Byzantine authorities viewed the Paulicians as heretics and a threat to the unity of the empire. Emperors launched severe persecutions against them, resulting in mass executions, forced relocations, and widespread violence. One of the most brutal campaigns occurred under Emperor Basil I in the 9th century, who sought to eradicate the Paulicians through military force. Thousands of Paulicians were massacred, and entire communities were uprooted and resettled in other parts of the empire. Despite these efforts, the Paulicians continued to resist, often forming armed groups to defend themselves against imperial forces. The Paulician persecutions highlight the extreme measures taken by the Byzantine Empire to enforce religious conformity and suppress dissent. The violence and repression faced by the Paulicians reflected the broader challenges of maintaining doctrinal orthodoxy in a diverse and often fractious empire. The legacy of the Paulician movement persisted, influencing later dualist sects such as the Bogams and the Cathars, and underscoring the enduring tensions between established religious institutions and radical reformist movements. The CircumCelions were a radical and militant faction of the Donatist movement in North Africa during the 4th and 5th centuries. They emerged as defenders of the rigorous Donatist position, which held that sacraments administered by clergy who had lapsed during persecution were invalid. The CircumCelions took this belief to an extreme, engaging in violent resistance against Roman authorities and the Orthodox Catholic Church. They sought to uphold the purity of the faith through acts of violence and self-sacrifice, often targeting property, clergy, and officials associated with their opponents. The CircumCelions were known for their guerrilla tactics and their willingness to embrace martyrdom. They would provoke confrontations with Roman soldiers and Orthodox Christians, seeking death as a way to attain spiritual glory. This radical approach made them a formidable and unpredictable force, leading to significant social and political instability in the region. Their actions were not limited to religious targets. They also attacked landowners and freed slaves, reflecting broader social grievances and a desire for justice. The Roman authorities responded with brutal repression, employing military force to suppress the CircumCelions. Many were captured, tortured, and executed, while others were forced into hiding. The movement gradually declined under sustained pressure from both the state and the Orthodox Church. The CircumCelion's radicalism and the harsh measures used against them highlight the volatile intersection of religious fervour, social justice, and political resistance in the early Christian era. Their legacy serves as a stark reminder of the extremes to which theological disputes and social conflicts can lead. The Bogams were a dualist sect that emerged in Bulgaria and the Balkans during the 10th century. They believed in a cosmic struggle between a good god and an evil demiurge who created the material world. This dualistic worldview led them to reject many of the orthodox Christian practices and teachings, including the sacraments, the veneration of saints, and the hierarchical structure of the church. The Bogams advocated for a return to a more simplistic and spiritual form of Christianity, emphasizing personal piety and asceticism. The Byzantine and Bulgarian authorities viewed the Bogams as a serious threat to religious and social order. Their teachings undermined the authority of the established church and challenged the legitimacy of the state. In response, both the Byzantine and Bulgarian rulers launched severe persecutions against the Bogams. This included mass arrests, trials, and executions of Bogomil leaders and followers. Many were forced to renounce their beliefs under threat of death, while others were driven underground or fled to more tolerant regions. The Bogomils' persecution reflects the broader struggles within medieval Christianity to maintain doctrinal uniformity and control over religious dissent. Despite the harsh measures taken against them, the Bogomil movement continued to influence other heretical sects in Europe, including the Cathars in France and the Bosnian Church. Their legacy highlights the enduring appeal of dualistic and reformist movements in the face of established religious and political authorities. The Waldenians, founded by Peter Waldo in the late 12th century, were a Christian movement that emphasized poverty, lay preaching, and a return to the teachings of the Bible. Waldo, a wealthy merchant from Lyon, renounced his wealth and began preaching a message of apostolic poverty and adherence to the Scriptures. His followers, known as Waldenians or the Poor of Lyon, sought to live according to the example of Christ and the early apostles, which led them to criticize the wealth and corruption of the Catholic Church. The Waldenians' teachings and practices quickly attracted the attention of church authorities. In 1184, the Third Lateran Council condemned the Waldenians as heretics, and they were subsequently excommunicated. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 reaffirmed this condemnation, leading to intensified efforts to suppress the movement. Waldenian preachers were hunted down by the Inquisition, and their followers faced persecution, including imprisonment, torture, and execution. Despite these efforts, the Waldenians managed to survive in remote areas of the Alps, maintaining their distinct religious identity. The Waldenians' resilience and continued existence highlight the persistent tensions between reformist movements and the established church. Their persecution underscores the lengths to which the medieval church would go to maintain doctrinal control and suppress dissent. In the 16th century, the Waldenians embraced the Protestant Reformation, aligning themselves with other reformist movements and continuing their struggle for religious freedom. Their legacy serves as a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of religious oppression. The Fourth Lateran Council, convened by Pope Innocent III in 1215, was one of the most significant ecclesiastical assemblies of the medieval period. It addressed a wide range of issues, including church reform, the definition of key doctrines, and the condemnation of heresies. Among its most notable decrees was the establishment of the Inquisition as a formal mechanism to combat heresy, reflecting the Church's increasing commitment to maintaining doctrinal purity and suppressing dissenting movements. One of the Council's primary targets was the Cathar heresy, which had spread widely in southern France. The Council's decrees mandated the persecution of heretics, calling for their arrest, trial, and punishment. This led to the intensification of the Albigensian Crusade, a brutal campaign aimed at eradicating the Cathars. The Council's actions resulted in widespread violence, forced conversions, and the execution of many who were deemed heretical. The Fourth Lateran Council's decisions had a profound and lasting impact on the relationship between the Church and heretical movements, setting the stage for centuries of religious conflict and persecution. The Council also addressed other issues such as the need for clerical reform, the regulation of the sacraments, and the definition of key theological doctrines. Its decrees on matters such as transubstantiation and the confession of sins became foundational for Catholic theology and practice. The Fourth Lateran Council's legacy is complex, reflecting both the Church's efforts to assert its authority and the often harsh measures used to enforce religious conformity. Its impact on medieval Christianity was profound, shaping the religious landscape of Europe for generations to come.